They found the last letter in 1888, signed in blood and mockery. But here's what they don't tell you in the documentaries, in the true crime podcasts that treat him like entertainment. The letters never stopped. Not really. They just stopped being delivered to the police. Because in Whitechapel, in those narrow alleys where the fog still clings like a living thing, people have been finding them tucked into door frames, slipped under welcome mats, pressed between the pages of library books about the murders themselves. Always the same handwriting, always that signature, and always they appear after someone hears the footsteps. I need you to understand something before we go further. I didn't believe any of this. I'm a historian, or I was, before I spent 6 months in Whitechapel researching Victorian crime for what was supposed to be a straightforward academic paper. I interviewed 43 residents. I walked those streets at every hour, and what I discovered wasn't just legend or folklore passed down through generations trying to make sense of horror. What I discovered was pattern, consistency, a timeline that doesn't break. The scream started in 1888, August 31st, the night Marianne Nichols died. But they didn't stop when the murders ended. Every resident I spoke to over the age of 60 remembered hearing them as children. Every single one. And here's where it gets strange. They all described the same scream, cut off at the exact same point, like a recording stuck on loop. But this was decades before any of them could have coordinated their stories, before the internet, before Whitechapel became a tourist destination for people chasing ghosts. A woman named Margaret Whitmore, 84 years old, told me she heard it first when she was 7. She was walking home with her father past Durward Street, what used to be Bucks Row, where Nichols died. 3 in the morning, coming back from her grandmother's deathbed. And she heard it. A woman's voice, sharp with terror, rising from the darkness of an alley that she could see was empty. Her father heard it too. He grabbed her hand and they ran, and he never spoke about it again. But she heard it 6 more times throughout her life. Always at 3 a.m., always in the same locations. Durward Street, Hanbury Street, Mitre Square, the death sites. Now you're thinking, this is suggestion, right? Collective hysteria. People who know the history, who've absorbed the legend, their minds playing tricks in the dark. That's what I thought. Until I met James Corrigan. James was 19, moved to Whitechapel from Manchester in 2019 to work in tech, knew nothing about the Ripper beyond the name, didn't care about history, didn't watch horror films, didn't even know which streets were significant. He was renting a flat on Hanbury Street because it was cheap, walking home from a late shift at 4 a.m. because his night bus got canceled. And he heard a woman scream, not distant, close. So close he could hear the exact moment her voice caught in her throat. He ran toward the sound, thinking someone was being attacked, pulled out his phone to call 999. The alley was empty, completely empty. But his phone recorded something. He showed me. You can hear him breathing, heavy, panicked. You can hear his footsteps. And underneath, barely audible, you can hear it. A woman's voice, not screaming anymore, whispering. 3 words over and over. Help me, help me, help me. The timestamp on the recording was 3:47 a.m., the exact time Marianne Nichols died. Would you have stayed? Would you have pressed record and walked deeper into that alley? Or would you have run like every instinct in your body was screaming at you to do? James moved out 3 days later, but before he did, he found something, wedged into the gap between his door and the frame, so thin he almost missed it. A piece of paper aged yellow, the edges rough like it had been torn from something larger. The handwriting was Victorian, copperplate script, precise and educated. It read, I am down on certain types of women and I shan't quit ripping them until I do get buckled. Yours truly. No signature this time, but at the bottom, in what looked like dried rust or old paint or something neither of us wanted to identify, a fingerprint. He gave it to me. I know I should have turned it over to police, to a museum, to someone official, but I didn't, because I needed to know if it was real, if this was some elaborate hoax. If Whitechapel had finally driven me as mad as it seemed to drive everyone who looked too closely. I had it tested. Private lab, no questions. Cost me everything I'd saved for the research. The paper dated to 1887. plus or minus 5 years. The substance used for the fingerprint was human blood, degraded, over a century old. Type O, same as 3 of the canonical 5 victims. Tell me in the comments what you would have done with that information. Because I made a choice that I can't take back. I went walking at 3 a.m., all 5 sites: Durward Street, Hanbury Street, Berner Street, Mitre Square, Miller's Court. I recorded everything. I wanted proof, documentation, something that would make sense of what was happening. And at each location, at exactly 3 a.m., I heard it. The scream. But only at Mitre Square did I hear something else. Footsteps, not mine. Behind me, steady, rhythmic, the click of heel on cobblestone even though the street was paved over decades ago. I didn't turn around. Every part of me wanted to, but I didn't. Because I could feel him looking at me. Could feel the weight of attention, that primal awareness that tells you when something is hunting you. The footsteps stopped when I stopped. Started when I walked. And then I heard breathing. Not my own. Slower. Measured. The breathing of someone who's completely calm. Who's done this before. Who knows exactly how this ends. I ran. I'm not ashamed to say it. I ran until my lungs burned and I couldn't hear anything but my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. And when I finally stopped, gasping, leaning against a wall 4 streets away, I looked down at my phone. The recording had stopped at 3:02 a.m., 2 minutes of audio, but I'd been walking for 37 minutes. I checked the timestamp on my watch, my phone's clock, every device I had. They all said 3:39 a.m. 37 minutes had passed in the real world. My recording captured 2. I played it back. You can hear my footsteps. You can hear the scream at Mitre Square. And then, underneath my breathing, underneath the ambient sound of distant traffic, you can hear him. A man's voice so close to the microphone it should have been right next to my ear. He's humming, a Victorian music hall tune. Sweet Violets. And then he stops humming and he speaks. His voice is educated, refined, almost gentle. He says, "You're trying so hard to find me, but I'm not lost. I never was." The recording ends there, just cuts out. But when I checked my photos, there was one I didn't take. The camera had triggered somehow, must have been in my pocket, must have been an accident. It's mostly dark, motion blurred, but you can see part of an alley, and in the background, in the fog that somehow shows up on a digital photograph, there's a silhouette. Tall, wearing something long, coat or cloak, and in his hand, catching just a sliver of streetlight, something that glints. I left Whitechapel the next morning, packed everything, abandoned my research, told my university I was taking a personal leave. I haven't been back, but 3 weeks ago, I received a letter. No return address. Postmarked from Whitechapel. Inside was a single page, that same Victorian handwriting. "You were so close, but you stopped looking. They all stop looking eventually. That's why I'm still here. That's why I'll always be here. Until someone has the courage to follow all the way down. Yours truly." And here's the part that keeps me awake. The part that made me reach out, made me decide to tell this story even though every rational part of my brain says I shouldn't. The letter came with something else. A photograph. Black and white, aged, from the 1960s based on the clothing and cars in the background. It shows a woman standing on Durward Street, looking at the camera. She's smiling, and behind her, slightly out of focus, there's a man. Tall, dark coat, top hat. And he's looking directly at the camera. Directly at whoever took this photo. His face is blurred just enough that you can't make out features, but his posture is clear. He's standing exactly where I stood when I heard the footsteps. In the exact same position. I had the photograph analyzed. It's genuine, unaltered, actually from the 1960s. The woman in it was identified through some historical society records. Her name was Elizabeth Marsh. She was a secretary, lived in Whitechapel her whole life, took that photo on a tourist visit documenting the Ripper sites. She died in 1967, 3 months after that photograph was taken. The official report said it was a heart attack, but her daughter, who I tracked down, told me something else. Her mother had become obsessed in those final months. Kept talking about a man she'd seen, a man who appeared in all her photographs from that day, even the ones she knew she'd taken alone. She started walking the streets at night, said she was looking for answers. They found her in Mitre Square at dawn. No signs of trauma, just dead. And clutched in her hand was a letter, handwritten in Victorian script, that her daughter threw away because it terrified her too much to keep. The shadows in Whitechapel are longer than they should be. The fog rolls in even on clear nights. And if you listen carefully at 3 a.m., if you're brave enough or foolish enough to stand in those alleys where history refuses to die, you'll hear it. The scream, the footsteps, the humming. Because some killers don't just leave bodies behind. Some leave imprints, echoes, pieces of themselves that soak into the stone and brick and fog until they become part of the place itself, until they become immortal. I'm telling you this because I need someone to know. Because if something happens to me, if I disappear, or if they find me like they found Elizabeth Marsh, someone needs to understand that this isn't legend. This isn't entertainment. This is real. This is happening. And it's been happening for 137 years. What comes next isn't something I can unsee. And if you stay with me, if you keep watching, I'll show you exactly what I found in the letters that Elizabeth Marsh's daughter kept hidden for 60 years. The ones that map out every appearance, every sighting, every death that connects back to him. Because the pattern doesn't end in Whitechapel. It spreads. Subscribe if you want to know where he appears next. Because the research I thought I abandoned, I'm going back. I have to. Someone has to follow it all the way down. And I need you to be witness to what I find.